Okay. Hare Krishna. All right. Jaya Radha Madhova Kunda Vihare. Jaya Radha Madhova Kunda Vihare. Gopinana Manava Yirivaruna Bhure Gopinana Balaba Yirivaruna Bhure Yasodhanandana Vrajadana Randana Yasodhanandana Vrajadana Randana Jamuna Tira Manachate Yamuna Tira Manachare Jayaranhu Madhava Kunna Vihate Jayaranhu Madhava Kunna Vihate Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Padadhare Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Padadhare Yasodhanandana Vrajadana Randana Yasodhanandana Vrajadana Randana Yamunate Ravanachate Yamunate Ravanachate Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihate Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihate Hare Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravidikacharya, also Teta Satashi Srimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Sayamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuranam Ki Jai Jagadaswami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachardi Nirvasesa Shunyavadi Paschachis Dejatarni. So, today I believe we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 7th chapter, text 40, right? Right. Is that right? Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Etan me aprichyata prashnan hare karma vivitsya bruhi me yasha mitravad ajaya nashta chakshusha etan me prachata prashnan ate karma vivitsya bruhi me yasha mitravad ajaya nashta chakshusha etan me prachata prashnan hare karma vivitsya bruhi me yasha mitravad ajaya nashta chakshusha etan me prachata prashnan hare karma vivitsya bruhi me yasha mitravad ajaya nashta chakshusha. Ladies? Shah. Nine. Good pronunciation. Anyone else? All right. Etan, all these, may, my, Pritchata, of one who inquires, Prashnan, questions, Hare, of the Supreme Lord, Karma, pastimes, Pavitsya, desiring to know, Bruhi, kindly described, May, unto me, Agasya, of one who is ignorant, Mitravat, because of friendship, Ajaya, by the external energy, Nashta Chakshusha, those who have lost their vision. Translation, my dear sage, I have put all these questions before you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the friend of all, so kindly describe them for all those who have lost their vision. So you can repeat, my dear sage, I have put all these questions before you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the friend of all, so kindly describe them for all those who have lost their vision. So, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vidura put forward many varieties of questions with a view to understanding the principles of transcendental loving service to the Lord. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, text 41, devotional service to the Lord is one, and the mind of the devotee is not diverted to the many branches of uncertainties. Vidura's purpose was to be situated in that service to the Lord wherein one merges undivertedly. Of course, merge in this particular context means is focused without any other diversion. Doesn't mean one merges. He acclaimed the friendship of Maitreya Muni, not because he was Maitreya's son, but because Maitreya was actually the friend of all those of all who have lost their spiritual vision due to material influence. So again, the verse, Etan me prachatak prashnan hare karma vivitsya bruhi me nyasya mitravat Vajayanashtachakshushah. So, Om Gana Timidanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Meditam Yena Tasmai Shikarve Namaha. So, going back to the verse. So, several words here in the verse that are interesting. Of course, Mitravat is extremely interesting for several reasons. Although it's not mentioned in the purport, Mitra was actually the father of Maitreya Muni. It's interesting. And there's actually two demigods, Mitra and Varuna. were like together. And these two, demigod, Mitra is the demigod of friendship, which is really interesting. The word Mitra, go further into the word Mitra, doesn't indicate an intimate friendship. You know, you have other words that indicate more intimate friendships, like bandhu. Isn't it? Like Krishna bandhu, friend of Krishna. Or suet, well-wisher, which is also there, suhridam sarvabhutanam, which Krishna says in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, suhridam sarvabhutanam, gatvam shantim richati. So, in this particular case, Vidura is indicating the relationship with Maitreya Muni in a more formal friendship sense. Like we say about the spiritual master, he's the friend of the poor and Lord and master of the devotees. Doesn't mean he's your buddy. You know, you could say the spiritual master is the friend, but he's not. You don't understand the difference of buddy? Buddy means, in English, of course, you just go up to someone, slap him on the back, say, hey, buddy, how are you doing? I'm your... And you do that with a spiritual master, you're finished. Because we have this interest, another thing we chant every morning, Bandhan vi savadana mate, right? In Hindi, I believe it means caution, savadana. Yes, be cautious. And you see this on the road signs in Hindi, but people are not cautious when driving. People take that savadana as go faster. Red light means go through, right? People have a real sense of what we call autonomy, not listening to authority. So when we talk about the spiritual master and Bandhan vi savadana mate, it means being very cautious and listening to the authority of the spiritual master and taking his words as our very life and soul. So it's an interesting word, mitra. So in that sense, the spiritual master is the friend of the poor, Lord, master of the devotees. And also he's surit, which I mentioned before, comes from the 529 in the Gita, suridam sarvabhutanam gatvam shantim richati. So he's the heart friend, he's the well-wisher of everyone, just like Krishna is the well-wisher of everyone. So in this particular verse, apart from the definition of that word, of course, Maitreya is the well-wisher of Vidura. And Vidura is approaching him because he's concerned not only for himself, although he uses the personal pronoun me, which means me, twice in this particular verse. He's not just concerned about himself, he's taking a humble position, but he's also referring to those who are bewildered by the flowery words of the Vedas, as Krishna describes in the Gita too. Krishna in the Gita states a very interesting verse, because Arjuna, in the beginning, is very bewildered by the flowery words of the Vedas. He's picking out Vedic conjunctions as an excuse, basically, to do what he wants to do, because he's really sentimental. You know, in the same way, we find under the guise of Hinduism, okay, I gotta be careful, don't offend anyone. Under the guise of, gotta remind myself of that all the time. So under the guise of Hinduism, actually the word Hindu is not a spiritual word. It actually is a geographical designation. It's because the people outside of India couldn't pronounce the S's properly. You know, Sindhu became Shindu, became Hindu. So anyway, in Hinduism, we find people who are very attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, but they're attached not for spiritual purposes. There's different purposes. They're attached for acquiring acquiring different things or worshiping. I mean, there's one story in the Mahabharata that's quite interesting. There was one person who wanted to worship the demigods to become rich. Some of you may have heard this story. But he was thinking, I have to find a demigod that nobody worships, so I'll be his only disciple. So he's looking all around, all these demigods. Everyone's Indra's disciple. Of course, not too many nowadays. Not too many Brahma disciples. But anyway, so he finds this cloud that happens to be a demigod. And he starts worshiping the cloud, and he becomes very, very wealthy because he's the only disciple. I mean, it's pretty good. If you want to have attention from your guru, you better find a guru who doesn't have many disciples. Otherwise, you get assigned a mentor, and a sub-mentor, and a sub-sub-mentor. There's a whole hierarchy there. Sometimes we may get envious of those devotees who are with Prabhupada in 26 Second Avenue because they could just walk into Prabhupada's room. And me, when I wanted to walk into Prabhupada's room, there was a big, heavy guard there. You can't come in unless you have some purpose. So this person, so he became very rich. So you find that kamastasta ritigyana prapajante nidevata, as Krishna says in the Gita, those who are ritigyana, which means they're bewildered, they don't have their knowledge, they don't have proper knowledge. Prapajante nidevata, they approach the demigods. And you could find so many verses in the Vedic literatures that you can take out of context to justify that. Find so many verses, and there's so many what we call, what is that word? Trying to remember that Sanskrit word, which is Shrutipala. So many Shrutipalas there. Shrutipala means the fruit of hearing. Just like we have at the end of many of our chapters in the Bhagavatam and other literatures. Anyone who hears this chapter will get this, will get that. Of course, generally, I like the ones who will go back to Godhead, will become a pure devotee, will never experience miseries in the material world again. But in other places, for example, you go to the Rig Veda, and you'll find most of the verses in the Rig Veda are meant for worshiping Indra. It's interesting, isn't it? So people get bewildered. And of course, there's a wonderful verse of the Rig Veda, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Pada Pashanti Yat Suryaha, that says that all the demigods are looking to Krishna, but people, or Vishnu, but people don't pay attention to that verse. They pay more attention to the verses that says by worshiping this demigod you get this, worshiping the demigod you get that. So the Vedas have so many different shlokas, as we often say, different shloks for different folks. And even devotees do that too. Right now we're having a discussion on the internet at the GBC conference. I don't know, call it a discussion, it's an argument. Like, where did the soul come from? And people are just pulling all these verses out. Is the soul coming from the Brahma Jyoti? Does the soul come from something called the Tatashta Shakti, which actually is just a designation of a particular aspect of Krishna's energies? It's not a place. Does the soul come from India? Does the soul come from Africa? I'm just joking about these things. So many discussions, and people are taking all these verses out of context to try to argue with other people. I mean, people get into all these arguments. They love arguments, isn't it? It's like Prabhupada told the story about the two philosophers who were arguing basically whether something that fell from the tree was cut or blew for the wind, and they were, what was it, the scissors or a knife? Yeah, scissors or a knife. And then they were fighting with each other, and one of them got so angry he was stronger. He threw the one who was arguing for the scissors into the water, and the person who was arguing for the scissors was drowning as he was going down. He was holding his hands up like that, saying, you know, I won the argument because you can't argue again, I'm dead. So, you know, people argue all these things, you know, and that's why, as Krishna says in the Gita, what Trigunya Vishaya Veda Nishtrigunya Bhavarjana Nirdvandvo Nidvashatvashto Nir Yoga Kshema Atmavan. That the Vedas are mainly dealing with the three modes of nature. And people don't understand the purpose of the Vedas. Trigunya Vishaya Veda, they're mainly for people in the modes of nature. And then Krishna says, Nishtrigunya Bhavarjana. You should rise above the modes of Arjuna and be established in the self. So the reason for that, the reason for the Vedas being like that is that people are naturally in Maya, so they need something to justify their Maya. Otherwise they reject the Vedas completely. I mean, even there's injunctions in the Vedas for meat eating. You want to eat meat once a month, you offer it to the goddess Kali, and you say to the goddess Kali that I'm killing this flesh, the goat. And in the next life, the goat will get a chance to eat meat, mamsa kadati, will get a chance to eat meat. So anyway, so there's these injunctions in the Vedas because we want people to accept the Vedas at least, or regulate their sense gratification so they can gradually elevate themselves. So, but Krishna says to Arjuna, you should rise above these materialistic Vedic injunctions, or taking things out of context. So of course, we were talking about this argument about where the soul came from. You know, so many people are arguing about the soul situation. But Prabhupada was very clear. Prabhupada told us back to home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada said we are originally Krishna-conscious living entities. That's why we need the guidance of a bona fide guru. And that's why Vidura is approaching Maitreya. Because it's very bewildering, the whole presentation of the Vedas. Another verse from the Mahabharata, you know, very famous verse from the Mahabharata. Tarko Pratishta Shutina Vivina. Some of you may have heard that verse before. Also, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quotes this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, he says as he's quoting it, Tarko Pratishta, one cannot understand the truth through one's logic and reasoning, that's Tarko. Pratishta does not establish. Shutina Vivina. Vibhina, that means the Vedas are so multi-branched. And you can only understand the absolute truth, how? Mahajanayena Gata Sapanta, as Vidura is doing, isn't it? Mahajanayena Gata Sapanta, approaching or taking shelter of the lotus feet or the path walked out by the Mahajanas, of the great devotees. That's the only way to do it. You can't. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. 3 times you got to repeat like that. So, really, that's what we should do. Another interesting verse, and that verifies the same thing, is a verse spoken by Jadabharat to King Rahugana. It's very interesting. See if I remember. Rahuganaita tapasa nayati nachejya nirvad grahad vinabha nachandasanaiva jalagni suryar bana mahatpada rijo vishekam. That no one can understand or attain the absolute truth through any other means than taking the dust of the feet of the pure devotee, which means hearing not simply you take the dust and you ignore what comes out of the mouth. It's like called the half a hen logic. People do that with Prabhupada. The Prabhupada, I love you. Why don't you listen to me? Because I love you. It means like someone gets married and the husband says to the wife, I love you, I love you, I love you. Can you get me something? No. It's like that story, the famous Indian story. I'm not going to mention the name of the person, because some of you may get offended. But anyway, a man got married one time. He was in love with his wife. And his wife's father gave him the cloth store to maintain his daughter. So he gave him a cloth store. So he was selling the cloth. And, but he was so much in love with his wife that every time someone wanted to buy a nice piece of cloth, he wouldn't sell it to the person. That's right. They don't bother me. They're fun. The rest of you are too old. So anyway, anytime someone wanted to buy a piece of cloth from him, he would think, oh no, they want to buy this cloth. It's so nice. It should be there for my wife. So the guy was losing money. And he would come home every day and bring all these nice saris for his wife. And his wife said, you rascal. And he said, I love you. Was like, get some money. No, I love you. Here's the saris, so. And of course, eventually, the interesting story is she told him, if you love Ram so much, if you would love Ram as much as you love me, you'd be a pure devotee. And he basically didn't like ladies after that point. But anyway, that's a different story. Some of you may recognize that story. So, anyway, so the point is, Rahuganai tat tapasana yati, that one is not going to understand the absolute truth by studying the Vedas or taking sannyas. Yati. Yati means to take sannyas. It's like Ramanujacharya was called Yati Raj, which means the king of the yatis. It's interesting, isn't it? King of the sannyasis. And there's a place in Govardhan called Yati, they call it Jatipur, which is the local pronunciation. Jatipur means the place of Madhavendra Puri, because he was the local sannyasi there. And also Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami and all the Goswamis who used to live there. So, Rahuganai tat tapasanayati nacheja nirva grahad. That one will not become Krishna conscious by becoming a good grahasta or by becoming a good sannyasi or putting yourself in fire in the middle of the summer or putting yourself in ice in the middle of the winter, but only by Mahabhishekam, only by taking the dust of the lotus feet of the devotee. That's interesting, isn't it? And so, to continue this whole discussion, Prabhupada makes reference in the purport to 241. So how does one take the dust of the lotus feet of a devotee? 241 is the famous verse, Vyavasayatmaka buddhya rekeha kuranandana bahushaktas tvantascha, that one should be one-pointed in determination. Vyavasayatmaka, those who are on this path are one point in their determination. Ekeha kuranandana. But those who are not on the path, who are not progressing in Krishna consciousness, bahushaktas tvantascha, their intelligence is many-branched. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, that means if one wants to advance in Krishna consciousness, as Prabhupada was very fond of his spiritual masters Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the same verse, which was that one has to be focused on the order of Guru. And Prabhupada was more focused on the order of his Guru than anyone in the modern world. It's not a comment on any of the Goswamis or anything like that, but anyone in the modern world who lived at the same time as us, as me. All of you were born later. So what do I mean by that? Like if you could compare, and this is not to criticize any of Prabhupada's God brothers, but Prabhupada received the instructions of his Guru to go to the Western world and to preach in English, and Prabhupada was focused on that instruction from his very accepting, the first time he accepted the instruction, which was when he was a young man. It's not that of course he didn't take sannyas immediately, but he was very focused in the sense of planning out how he could carry out that instruction. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said to Prabhupada, you're educated young men, you should preach Lord Chaitanya's message in English. And Prabhupada was focused on that. And he was so focused that in old age, of course, from my perspective, Prabhupada was young when he came to the West. So anyway, so at old age, he underwent so many austerities. That's Krishna consciousness. And then following up in the Bhagavad Gita, and those who are not progressing in Krishna consciousness, Bhogaishvarya Prasaktanantaya Praja Chetasam, Vyavasayatmika Buddhir Samado Navatiyate, those who are not focused like that, and those who are attached to what? Bhoga and Aishvarya. Bhoga means sense gratification and opulence, or position, just like we were talking last night, that sometimes you give someone a position and then they become enamored by that position. That's Aishvarya, opulence. You know, like you become a sannyasi or somehow, or they become opulent because you rob the poor householders of their opulence. That's not weird. Anyway, we gave that example from the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the sannyasi is actually like the beekeeper who takes all the honey from the bees. The poor bees have to starve to death. So anyway, so people get opulence, not only the opulence of, wealth or position, but also the opulence, as Queen Kunti mentions, Janmaishvarya, Shutasha Shibir, Edamana Adapuman. So any opulence in this world is very bewildering. Janmaishvarya, Shutasha Shibir. Even if one is very physically attractive. I mean, for example, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was very worried about Lord Chaitanya, because Lord Chaitanya took sannyasa when he was 24 years old, and he was attractive. Well, of course, most attractive. He's Bhagavan. So he was very worried, how are you going to keep your sannyas? So he wanted to just almost like reinitiate him or re-give him the mantras or perform another samskara for him, so that he would be more fixed in his sannyas. So all these different opulences bewilder one, so one has to be really fixed. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. Now what is buddhi? Buddhi means intelligence, which is higher than the mind. Generally, we're not very fixed in our intelligence. We're on the Mano-retain asati davato bahi. But we're on the mental platform, the mental chariot, Mano-rata. What's your car called? Do you have a Tesla or Mercedes? No, I have a Mano-rata. You know what Manurata means? Chariot, rata. So we're on the chariot of the Mano Vitenasati Davatobahi. We remain outside. So it really means developing our sense of mature discrimination based upon shastric knowledge. In other words, and also based upon relationship with our spiritual master. Like I often give the example that when I use my sense of discrimination, I'm thinking, would Prabhupada be pleased or would he not be pleased by this particular course of action? And that keeps me on the straight. That's buddhi. Mana, or the mind, is something different. Does this please me? Like children are generally on the manorata. You know, for example, one child will call another one, you're an idiot or a fool, or something like that. I mean, it's innocent, it's kind of fun. But if I do that, if I start calling people idiot, fool, rascal, then, unless I'm giving them guidance, sometimes it's required. Sometimes, like Prabhupada would do that sometimes. But it means that I'm just basically expressing my own feelings that I'm not concerned about then, and I'm not thinking what's best for pleasing Krishna. So as adults, before we do anything or when we do something, we should be thinking, what is pleasing to Guru and Krishna? And act in that way, controlling our senses. That's how to control the senses. It's very easy. That's bhakti. You know, otherwise, sense control is very difficult, like Vishwamitra Muni. When Menaka came, he didn't think of his Guru Maharaj. I don't even know if he had a Guru Maharaj. I don't know, maybe he did. Probably did. Anyway, he rejected his Guru Maharaj. He rejected Vashishta. So he didn't think like that. He just thought, oh, trying to execute austerities. Here's Menaka, Hari Bol. 10 years lost. Of course, it wasn't all lost because there was Shakuntala who was born. You know Shakuntala? It's a famous story, which I'm not going to tell. So, but if one's thinking of Guru Maharaj, then Menaka may come. Please don't send Menaka. And this is not a challenge. I'm speaking theoretically. Menaka, you know. It's interesting, I often give the example, this is an example for you ladies, that if Ravana came, you probably all fall in love with him and go with him and give up your ugly husbands. So, I mean, most of the girls who were kidnapped by him, they loved him. It's true. I mean, how are you going to do better than a husband who's, Trilokeshwara, basically... He's like taking over the heavenly planets, he's a really cool guy. He's handsome, he's rich, he's famous. What are you going to do? Got an earthly husband there. So, but Sita Devi didn't voluntarily go with Ravana. Actually, it was Maya Sita. Because she was in love. So this is really interesting, you do this metaphor or this comparison. That Sita Devi was in love. And all the other girls, practically all of them, I mean, there's one exception, that was Ramba, who wasn't enthusiastic. But anyway, most of the other girls, they're just like, boop, take me away from this horrid husband. So most of the other girls, they were just happy as larks. Because Ravana could not have a girl unless she voluntarily gave in because he was cursed. So why did he have all those girls there? In the same way, Menaka comes down, or Ramba comes down, or what to speak of Urvasi. Of course, Arjuna was able to deal with Urvasi, right? He said, Mataji. So, because Arjuna had a sense of duty. So that's the point. You have a sense of connection and duty. So what is Arjuna's duty? Duty to his brothers who he loved. So there's that bhakti there. And duty to Krishna. Krishna advised him, you go to the heavenly planets. Vyasadeva also advised him like that in the Mahabharata. You go to the heavenly planets, you perform these austerities, get some weapons. So he was Vyavasayatmaka Buddhir Ekeha Kuranandana. And so, because of bhakti is such a strong force that one can do the amazing things, like Prabhupada did amazing things. It was bhakti. We say empowered, we use those words, empowered, great preacher, which is true about Prabhupada. But it was Prabhupada's force of devotion that actually got him to do something at that age. His love. Not the sense that, I want to get liberated, I want to go back to Godhead. That's all about me, right? Because you can't go back to Godhead as long as you want to go back to Godhead. It's a trick. You go back to Godhead when you simply, Mama Janmani Janmani Shre Bhavatad Bhakti Ahoitiki Twaye, you simply want to do whatever Krishna wants. Because if you want to go back to Godhead because you want to get liberated, that's not the motive. In the beginning, it brings people to Krishna, Chatra Vidha Bhajanti Mam. People come to Krishna because they're in distress. But in the end, it's not going to take you to Krishna. What's going to take you to Krishna is that I simply want to please Krishna and Guru. Mama Janmani Janmani Shvare Bhavatad Bhakti Ahaituki Twaye. Life after life. And as Bhaktivinoda Thakur chants, Kita Janma Hoy Yatatu Das. I'll take birth even as an insect. If that insect is your devotee, or Brahma Janma Nayash. I will not take birth as Lord Brahma if he's not a devotee. So you got those two things. So anyway, so that's the point with Vidura and Maitreya, Vyavasayatmaka Buddhir. To understand properly the Vedas, to understand the purpose of life, one has to approach a proper guru, otherwise one will not become bewildered by the flowery words of the Vedas. In order to proceed on the path, one has to be focused with devotion. Mitra. So again, that word is there, Mitra, which means the friend of the poor and Lord and Master of the devotees. And in this way, understanding. So that's the way I understand Prabhupada. Prabhupada is my real well-wisher, ever well-wisher friend. That's a real friend. Most friends are ordinary friends. What do they say? I scratch your back, you scratch my back. Or they also say a friend in need is a friend indeed. So we need someone who will stick with us all the time. And that was really what impressed me with Srila Prabhupada when I met him. That here was someone who really cared for me even though I was a rascal. Someone who really cared for everybody. And so there, I felt that reciprocation with Prabhupada more than I felt with anyone else. To an unlimited degree. My parents love me. Obviously, they love me. I have very, very good parents. But with Prabhupada, it was on a different level. It was on an infinite level. So that my desire is to reciprocate that. So, what is it? Vidvag Vapurvir Vedadam Namaste Jiveta Yo Mukti Pade Siddhaya Pak. So with body, mind, and words. So anyone questions? Questions or comments? What, another microphone or something? Questions, that's good. Big temple room, few people.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for this lecture today. So I have this practical question where I struggle hearing from my spiritual master when he's not around. So when he's here, I try to follow him as much as possible and hear from him. But the same energy is not within me once he's, out of my sight. So I want to draw some inspiration from you how I can regularly hear and what is the importance of that service.
Good question. One has to understand the heart of the spiritual master. And the way to understand the heart is not contingent, not dependent upon physical presence. Like Prabhupada, he had maybe a handful of meetings with his Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada describes that, not a lot of meetings. Prabhupada wasn't like in the, quote, external inner circle with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Following Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And his godbrothers actually criticized him for not fully joining, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, leave him alone, in due course of time, he'll do everything. And Prabhupada, one of my favorite interactions he had with his Guru Maharaj, of course there's many, was when Prabhupada wrote that poem, Absolute Ascension thou hast proved, impersonal calamity thou hast moved. You're probably familiar with that. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, he has understood my mission. And so, by hearing, and nowadays, we have more opportunity to hear from our spiritual master than ever before. By the mercy of the internet, the internet gods. There must be a demigod in charge of the internet, I don't know what his name would be. Gates? Bill Gates? Elon Musk? I'm not sure. So anyway, so the mercy of the internet, we hear, just like my interactions with Prabhupada. Yeah, I was with Prabhupada a few times. Was at darshans with Prabhupada and everything like that. But really, I hear regularly and I read regularly Prabhupada's books. And I understand somehow or other, I've imbibed Prabhupada's mood. And also you have like Rupa Goswami, for example, Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Miyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swa Patantikam. Rupa Goswami is like one of the Samstapaka acharyas, main founder acharyas, because he understood the mind of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the intention. By mind it means intention or mood. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam, and he's establishing it, Bhutale. And so, really, it's a question of hearing. Because sometimes with personal interactions, you may not find out as much. Like if you were with Prabhupada, Prabhupada would say, cook this food, which is nice. You find out how to cook. But when you're listening to class, or listening, there's so much opportunity. Whoever someone is initiated by, there's so much opportunity there on the internet, isn't it? You could just drown yourself in Krishna Katha in so many different ways. So, you know the whole thing with Vani and Vapu. The Vani is more important than the Vapu. So we find, it's interesting, we find that many of the devotees who didn't have much association with Prabhupada are more focused on Prabhupada than some of the devotees who had a lot of association with Prabhupada. I mean, we had many devotees leave the movement who basically had a lot of association with Prabhupada, and they became enamored because of their position or whatever. They thought they had a special position. And because of that, they committed offenses against Vaishnavas. And because they committed offenses against Vaishnavas, they lost their ability to understand things, and they lost their determination. So you have a wonderful opportunity. You have more opportunity now because, of course, Prabhupada decided there's so many, to associate with Prabhupada, there's so much opportunity. But now there's so many means of associating with Guru through, the electronic means. I mean, we have a few videos of Prabhupada, I don't know, several thousand classes of Prabhupada. But at that time, videos were just, the ability to take personal videos was just starting when Prabhupada was on the planet. And it was quite expensive, the equipment. Now everybody has a camcorder or phone. Can you imagine Prabhupada was here today, everybody holding their phone up, following Prabhupada around. Prabhupada got kind of frustrated, like you see people like in classes or the other day I was watching some Kirtan Mela on YouTube, and everybody, instead of participating in the Kirtan, everybody had their phone up. Half the people, instead of dancing and chanting. You seen that? Or in Rath Yatra, like that, the poor bystanders. So, therefore, I don't think there's a problem. Because if you understand the mood, then you'll have the spiritual master in the heart, and the spiritual master will be giving you instruction. Because basically, in this world, people's physical bodies are temporary, and after a while, people do have this habit of leaving the planet. And and just like I had to deal with it when Prabhupada left. And of course, it was very emotionally draining when Prabhupada left. We were all crying, but it happens. And then one has to really focus on the mood of the spiritual master. Prabhupada said in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam that if one focuses on the mood of the spiritual master, then the super soul is reached. So, does that answer that question? Yeah, take advantage while the internet's still working. Who knows? Download everything. Put it on your computer or whatever while you still got electricity. Who knows what the future will hold? Anything can happen, like wars or something like that, and then the internet wouldn't work, and then we would all be separated, and now you have an opportunity. You really don't know when you're going to lose opportunities. What do they say? Opportunity knocks but once. So when you lose the opportunity, I'm just taking this scenario where there'd be a world war or something like that, and you'd be isolated. And your electronic equipment would all be fried from the EMPs. You know what an EMP is? Electromagnetic pulse. All their chips would be just gone. You say, oh no, I can't hear my guru anymore. We got some books, but anyway. Okay. I think it's time. Half of our audience left already. But actually, we probably have an internet audience, right? People are watching on the internet? Which camera? That one over there? That one. And you got another one there. You have 2 cameras? What? So you have 2 cameras. That one and that one. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. So we'll see everybody, hopefully. There'll be 2 or 3 people tonight when we come. All glories is Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.